It was supposed to be just another normal day, nothing special. I woke up late as usual, with the alarm buzzing and my phone vibrating on the nightstand. The time read 7:30 a.m., and I cursed under my breath. I was already behind schedule. I quickly jumped out of bed, grabbed my phone, and saw a few emails that needed my attention. Work as always. No surprise there. I quickly skimmed through them, replying to the urgent ones. My boss was constantly sending me messages. Hurry up with the project. Where is the report? All the usual stuff. The day had barely begun, and I could already feel the pressure building up. As I got dressed, my mind was still stuck on work. I didn't think about much else. I wasn't the type to get emotional about small things. I had my routine, my life, and honestly, I wasn't looking for anything to mess that up. Relationships? They were complicated. Too much effort. My last one ended in disaster, and I wasn't interested in trying again anytime soon. I grabbed a coffee from my favorite place on the corner and headed straight to the office. When I got there, my assistant, Sarah, was already waiting for me. She handed me a stack of papers and gave me a quick rundown of what I needed to do today. The usual. Emails, meetings, calls, just another busy day. But then, out of nowhere, I got a message that made my heart skip a beat. It was a text from an unknown number. The message simply said, "We need to talk. I have something important to tell you." I stared at it for a few seconds. What could this be about? I didn't recognize the number. It didn't seem like something urgent. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I quickly typed a reply, asking who it was. The person responded almost immediately. "It's Mia. I have something you need to know. It's about your son." I froze. My son? What was she talking about? I didn't have a son. I didn't even have any children. I couldn't remember ever meeting anyone named Mia either. My heart started racing, and I felt the blood rush to my head. Was this some kind of joke? I typed back quickly. "What are you talking about? I don't have a son." Mia's reply came instantly. "You need to hear me out. I'm not joking. Please, let's meet and talk." I was lost. What the hell was going on? This didn't make sense. I had no son. How could I? I was too busy for that kind of thing. I had never even thought about having kids. There was no way. I decided I needed answers. I told Sarah I had an urgent meeting to attend, though in reality, I had no idea where I was going. I quickly grabbed my coat and left the office, my thoughts swirling. Who was Mia? And what was all this about a son? I met Mia at a small cafe in the city center, trying my best to keep my calm. She was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, waiting for me. When I saw her, something felt familiar. She looked like someone I had seen before, but I couldn't place her. I walked up to the table, and she stood up as soon as she saw me. "Mia?" I asked, still not sure what to expect. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady but tense. "I know this is hard to believe, but I need you to listen." I sat down across from her, trying to stay composed, but I could feel the tension in the air. "What do you mean, your son?" "I don't have any kids. You've got the wrong guy." She shook her head. "No, you do. His name is Leo. He's 6 years old. I'm the one who's been taking care of him." I couldn't speak. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind, but none of them made sense. "What are you talking about? I don't know anyone named Leo." Mia sighed and pulled out her phone. She handed it to me. On the screen was a picture of a young boy, probably about 6 years old. His hair was messy, but he had the same blue eyes I saw every time I looked into a mirror. "This is Leo," she said quietly. "He's your son, Jason." I stared at the picture for what felt like an eternity. My stomach churned. This couldn't be real. I had no idea how to process this. My life, my plans, everything I had worked for, none of it included this. "This is some kind of mistake," I muttered, shaking my head. "I don't even know who you are." Mia's face softened, but there was still a sadness in her eyes. "I've known about Leo for a while, Jason. We met when he was a baby. He's been asking about you. He needs to know his father." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. The idea of a child, my child, needing me was foreign. And yet, somehow, it was the only thing that felt real in that moment. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. This is a lot to take in. Mia didn't say anything for a few moments, just letting me absorb what she had said. I looked at her, trying to make sense of the situation, but the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I didn't ask for this, I said finally. I don't know how to be a father. I know, she replied gently. I'm not asking you to change everything overnight, but Leo needs to know that his father is there for him. He's asking for you. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell her that this was too much for me, that I couldn't be the father he needed. But then I remembered the picture of Leo, the way he looked in the photo. There was no going back now. I'll meet him, I said, my voice low. I'll meet him, but I don't know what to do after that. Mia smiled, though it wasn't a smile of happiness. It was more like relief. That's all I ask. Just meet him. That's the first step. I left the cafe, feeling like I had stepped into someone else's life. This wasn't the plan. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But now that it had, I had to figure out how to handle it. How to be a father to a boy I didn't even know existed. The thought of it scared me. I had no idea what to expect. No idea how to be the man Leo needed. But I couldn't walk away. Not now. I couldn't shake the feeling of confusion as I sat at my desk. My mind kept racing back to the call I'd received earlier. The daycare center had said Leo had been left there for 3 days. 3 days. I was supposed to pick him up, but I hadn't even realized it. How did I let this happen? I had no idea what to do now. The truth hit me hard. I had been so wrapped up in work, in meetings, and in making deals, that I had completely ignored the most important thing, my son. Leo. He was mine, and I hadn't even noticed he was missing. That thought alone made me sick to my stomach. I had no experience with kids. I didn't even know where to start. How could I be a father if I couldn't even keep track of simple things like picking up my own kid? I snapped out of my thoughts when I heard my assistant, Anna, knock lightly on my office door. Mr. Anderson, she said, pushing the door open just a crack. Your next meeting is in 10 minutes. Should I tell them you're running late? I paused for a second. The usual answer would have been yes. Of course, I was always running late. But not today. Not after hearing that Leo had been alone for 3 days. No, cancel it, I said, surprising myself. I need to take care of something. Anna raised an eyebrow, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded and left the room, closing the door behind her. I felt the weight of her gaze on me, but I couldn't focus on that now. I grabbed my jacket and rushed out of the office. I wasn't even sure where I was going, but I knew I had to fix this. I got in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. The daycare worker had told me Leo was upset. He hadn't wanted to leave, and he'd been alone for 3 whole days. Why hadn't anyone called me earlier? Why didn't I get a reminder? But no, I couldn't blame anyone else. This was my fault. I had failed him. The drive to the daycare felt like it took forever, even though it was only about 20 minutes away. My mind raced with all the possible scenarios. What would I say to him? How would I explain that I hadn't been there for him? I was still trying to figure it out when I finally pulled into the parking lot. I parked and took a deep breath. I had to calm down. I couldn't let Leo see me in a panic. I had to be strong for him, even though I didn't feel strong at all. As I walked toward the daycare entrance, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. My thoughts were a mess, but I had to focus on one thing. Leo needed me now. I walked inside and approached the front desk. The receptionist, a woman with short blonde hair, looked up and gave me a sympathetic smile. Mr. Anderson, Leo's been waiting for you. He's in the playroom. Her voice was kind, but I could hear the concern in it. I nodded, trying to hide how nervous I felt. Thanks, I said, forcing a small smile. I made my way down the hallway to the playroom. As I walked in, I saw Leo sitting on the floor, surrounded by toys. He looked up when I entered, his face lighting up with recognition. Dad, Leo cried, standing up quickly and running toward me. I bent down to his level and opened my arms. Leo jumped into my embrace, and I held him tightly. It felt good to feel his small arms around me, but it also broke my heart. This was the moment I had missed for so long. I wasn't sure what to say, but I knew I had to make things right. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "I'm so sorry I didn't come for you. I messed up." Leo pulled back slightly, looking at me with those big brown eyes. "Where were you, Dad? I was waiting. Why didn't you come?" The simple question hit me harder than anything else. He was just a kid. Why was I making this so difficult? "I know, Leo," I said, my voice cracking a little. "I'm really sorry. I've been busy with work, and I just forgot. But that's no excuse, and I promise I'm going to do better." Leo didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me for a moment, as if trying to figure out if I was being honest. Finally, he spoke. "Okay," he said quietly, his voice still a little shaky, "but I don't like being here alone." "I know, Leo. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again," I promised him. I stood up, pulling Leo with me. "Let's go home," I said. "How about I take you to your favorite place for dinner? My treat. You can have anything you want." His face lit up at the mention of food. "Pizza." I chuckled, relieved to see him smiling. "Pizza sounds good." As we walked out of the daycare, I felt a bit more at ease. At least Leo wasn't upset with me anymore. But I knew this was just the beginning. I had a lot of making up to do. The ride home was quiet. Leo was sitting in the back seat, and I couldn't help but glance at him in the rearview mirror every now and then. I could see that he wasn't mad anymore, but I knew I had a lot to prove to him. When we finally got to the apartment, Leo looked around at the cold, modern decor and frowned. I could tell he wasn't comfortable here, and it made me feel guilty. This wasn't how I imagined being a father. I had always pictured a perfect little family, but now I felt like I was struggling just to keep it together. As I set up dinner, Leo sat at the kitchen counter, quietly fiddling with his phone. I couldn't help but notice that he seemed distant again, like he wasn't sure if he could trust me completely. I wanted to fix it, but I didn't know where to start. After dinner, Leo helped me clean up. There were moments of silence, but they didn't feel as heavy as before. We were starting to get back on track, but I knew we still had a long way to go. As Leo headed to bed, he turned to me with a small smile. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, Leo," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something better. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Leo's laughter echoing from the living room. It was one of those moments when you realize how much you've missed something. The sound of joy in the house, the life that had been absent for so long. I sat up in bed, taking a deep breath, and tried to shake off the remnants of last night's exhaustion. I wasn't sure what today would bring. I knew I had to face the consequences of my actions, but I didn't even know where to start. I'd apologized to Leo, sure, but it didn't feel like enough. I had to make things right. I had to be the kind of father he deserved, not the one who only showed up when it was convenient or when things were falling apart. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 9 a.m. I had a few hours before I had to deal with the mess of work again. I figured I'd start by having breakfast with Leo, just the two of us. Maybe we could talk, maybe not. I didn't want to push him, but I also knew we needed to rebuild our connection. I stood up, stretching, and walked into the kitchen. Leo was sitting at the counter, eating cereal with a spoon in his right hand. He didn't even look up as I walked in, but I wasn't surprised. I'd seen that look before, the one that said he wasn't sure if he could let me in completely just yet. "Hey, bud," I said, trying to sound casual. "How's the cereal?" He shrugged without answering, which made my stomach twist. He had always been a talker, always had a million questions for me. But now, it was like I was talking to a stranger. It hurt more than I expected. I grabbed a mug from the cabinet and poured myself some coffee, letting the steam rise up. I didn't really feel like talking, either. But we had to start somewhere. I took a seat next to Leo, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening, but somehow it felt necessary. We were both thinking, both processing what had happened the day before, and neither of us was sure how to move forward. I was about to take a sip of my coffee when Leo finally broke the silence. "Dad, yeah, are we going to go to the park today?" he asked, his voice soft but hopeful. I almost choked on my coffee. Of course he wanted to go to the park. Leo had always loved it, and it had been months since we'd done anything like that together. I had been so caught up in work and the constant demands of my job that I hadn't even thought about what he needed. I wiped my mouth with a napkin and set the mug down. Yeah, of course. We'll go. We'll spend the whole day there if you want. Leo's face lit up, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw that spark of excitement in his eyes. It was a small thing, but it made my heart swell with a strange mix of relief and guilt. He was still a kid. He still wanted to spend time with me, even after everything. I'll get my shoes, Leo said, jumping off his chair and running toward the hallway. His excitement was contagious, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could fix this. Maybe I could still be the father I was supposed to be. I cleaned up the dishes as quickly as I could, trying not to think too much about the weight of the situation. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. I couldn't just show up once in a while and expect everything to fall into place. I needed to change, but I didn't know how yet. All I knew was that I had to try. For Leo. By the time Leo returned with his shoes on, I was ready. He looked up at me with an excited grin, and I smiled back, feeling something warm inside me for the first time in a while. Let's go, Dad, Leo said, tugging at my sleeve. We spent the next couple of hours at the park. It was a beautiful day, the sun shining bright and the air crisp, but not too cold. Leo ran around, climbing on the jungle gym and playing with other kids. I watched him from a distance, letting him have his space, but also keeping an eye on him. There was a part of me that still felt unsure. Was I doing enough? Could I really fix this? We sat down for a snack on a bench, and Leo seemed to be in a great mood, which made me feel a little better. I couldn't change what had already happened, but maybe I could make today count. I took a deep breath and turned to him. Leo, I want you to know something, I said, my voice low. I'm really sorry for everything. I've been a terrible father lately. I've been so caught up in work that I didn't pay attention to what really matters. Leo looked at me, his expression serious. It's okay, Dad. I just want you to be here with me. I nodded, my throat tightening. I promise, I'm going to do better. I'm going to be here. For you. He smiled, that sweet, innocent smile that had always melted my heart. It was like nothing had ever happened. In that moment, I felt like I could do anything. I could be the kind of father Leo deserved. But it wasn't going to happen overnight. As the day went on, I started to feel more and more like the old me. The me who was capable of being there, of taking care of Leo, of giving him the love and attention he needed. But it was still so new. I didn't know how to make up for the lost time. I didn't know how to erase the mistakes I had made. But maybe I didn't have to. Maybe all I needed to do was keep showing up. Keep being there. Keep trying. After the park, we headed home. Leo had worn himself out, and as soon as we walked through the door, he was yawning and rubbing his eyes. I picked him up and carried him to his room, tucking him in for the night. Good night, Dad, he said, his voice drowsy but content. Good night, Leo. I love you. I love you too, he mumbled, already half asleep. I stood there for a moment, watching him sleep. He was safe. He was loved. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right track. There was still so much work to do, but I knew I would do whatever it took to make things right. The next morning was tough. The sun streamed through the window, making everything look like it could be perfect, but my head was spinning. The events of the day before had settled on my mind like a weight I couldn't shake off. Even though Leo had forgiven me, even though we'd had a good day at the park, I still felt the sting of the past few months. I had failed him. I had failed myself. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the coffee cup in front of me, trying to gather my thoughts. I didn't know how I was supposed to fix all of this. It wasn't as simple as just being there for him. Being there wasn't enough. It was everything I'd done before that had led me here. My work, my distractions, the way I pushed him away when he needed me most. It had all caught up to me, and it felt like there was no way out. I could hear Leo moving around upstairs. He was probably getting dressed, getting ready for another day. I wanted to go up and talk to him, but I wasn't sure what to say. What if he didn't want to hear it? What if I wasn't enough? Stop it, I muttered under my breath, slamming the palm of my hand against the table. I wasn't going to back down now. I couldn't. The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted my thoughts, and before I knew it, Leo was standing in the doorway, watching me. His eyes were wide, like he was unsure if he should approach or not. "Hey, buddy," I said, forcing a smile. "You ready for breakfast?" Leo nodded but didn't say anything. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. I wanted to ask him about it, to make sure he was okay, but I wasn't sure how to phrase it. There was a distance between us now. I knew I had to bridge it, but where to start? He walked over and sat down at the table, pushing the cereal box toward me. I poured him a bowl of it, just like I always had, and tried to act normal. But everything felt so off. I wanted to tell him how sorry I was again, how much I regretted the way I'd been, but the words didn't come. Instead, we sat there in silence, both of us caught in our own thoughts. It was strange, the way we could still be so close, yet feel so far apart. Finally, after a few minutes, Leo spoke. "Dad, can we do something fun today?" I blinked, surprised by the question. Of course, he wanted to do something fun, but I knew that wasn't really what he was asking. He was asking if I could be there, really there for him. No distractions, no excuses, just me, focused on him, the way it should have always been. "Yeah, sure," I replied, trying to sound enthusiastic. "What do you want to do?" Leo hesitated for a moment, then looked up at me. "Can we go to the zoo?" I couldn't help but smile. It was a simple request, but it meant everything. He was asking for my time, my attention. It was something I should have been giving him all along. "Absolutely," I said, standing up and ruffling his hair. "The zoo it is." We finished breakfast quickly, and after a few minutes of rushing around, we were out the door. Leo was bouncing with excitement, and I couldn't help but feel a little lighter. The weight of the past few weeks was still heavy, but it wasn't as crushing. Being with Leo like this, knowing that he still wanted to be with me, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. The drive to the zoo was filled with the kind of chatter I'd missed. Leo asked me about the animals, about the exhibits, about everything. It felt good to hear his voice again, to be involved in his world. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was present, listening, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I was getting it right. When we arrived, Leo was practically bouncing out of the car. We walked through the gates, and he immediately pulled me toward the giraffes, his favorite animals. He loved how tall they were, how their long necks reached for the trees, and how they seemed so calm despite their size. I followed him, watching his excitement, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let go of all the guilt and shame I'd been carrying. I was here. I was with him. That was all that mattered. We spent hours walking through the zoo, taking in the animals, laughing together, and even stopping for ice cream. Leo had a way of making everything feel simple again, like there were no problems, no worries, just us and the world around us. It was like we were starting fresh, even though we both knew that wasn't true. There was a lot of work ahead of us, but for today, I was content. By the time we left, it was late afternoon. Leo was exhausted, his eyes drooping as he leaned against me on the walk back to the car. I smiled and picked him up, carrying him to the car. It was moments like this that reminded me of what I had almost lost. I had taken it all for granted, but now I was trying to do better. As we drove home, I glanced at Leo in the rearview mirror. He was asleep, his head resting against the window, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. I felt a lump in my throat, the overwhelming need to protect him, to be the father he deserved, to never let him down again. When we got home, I carried Leo inside and tucked him into bed. He barely stirred, still deep in sleep. I kissed him on the forehead, my heart aching with love and regret. "Good night, buddy," I whispered. "I'm here, always." I closed the door softly and sat on the couch, staring at nothing in particular. I had no idea how to fix everything, but I knew I was going to try. For him, I would keep showing up, one day at a time. The next few days passed in a blur. I did my best to stay present with Leo, to focus on him, but the weight of everything else kept pulling at me. There were meetings to attend, work piling up on my desk, and unfinished conversations that I had been avoiding. My mind kept drifting, and I hated myself for it. How could I let my son down again? How could I be so consumed by everything else when I knew that the one thing I needed to get right was him? I spent most of the morning working from home, trying to catch up on everything. My phone buzzed with texts from people I didn't want to deal with, but I ignored them. Today was about Leo. I couldn't afford to get distracted. Around noon, I decided it was time for a break. Leo was still at school, and I had a few hours to myself. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a sandwich, and sat at the table. I didn't feel hungry, but I knew I needed to eat. The silence in the house was overwhelming. I could hear the ticking of the clock, each second dragging by like a reminder of how much time I'd wasted. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages I had ignored earlier. There were a few from my co-workers, a couple from my ex-wife, and one from Mia. My heart skipped a beat when I saw her name. We hadn't spoken in a while. The last time we had talked, things were complicated, to say the least. I wasn't sure I was ready to face her yet, but I opened the message anyway. It was short, just a few words. "Hey, are you okay? Haven't heard from you in a while." I stared at the screen for a long time, the words weighing heavily on me. I wasn't sure what to say. What did I want from her? Did I want to pick up where we left off? Or was this just her way of checking in, nothing more? I put the phone down and sighed. My mind was spinning. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I wasn't going to find it in my phone. The front door opened, and I looked up to see Leo walking in, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His face lit up when he saw me. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice full of excitement. "Guess what happened at school today?" I smiled, relieved by his energy. This was what I needed. I needed to focus on him, to make sure he felt like he was my priority. He was the one thing that had kept me going through all the chaos, and I had to make sure I didn't lose sight of that. "What happened?" I asked, trying to sound as enthusiastic as he did. "We got to do a science experiment," he said, his eyes sparkling. "It was so cool. We made a volcano erupt." I laughed. "A volcano, huh? That sounds awesome. Did it make a mess?" "You bet. It was everywhere," he said, rolling his eyes as if it had been the best part. "But I didn't get any on me, so that's good, right?" "Definitely," I said, chuckling. "Sounds like you had a fun day." "Yeah, I'm so glad it's the weekend," he said, setting his backpack down and walking over to the couch. "We can do something fun, right? Like go to the park or something." I felt a pang of guilt. The last time we went to the park had been so much more than just an outing. It had been a reminder of what I was missing, of the relationship I had taken for granted. But I didn't want Leo to feel like I was avoiding him, so I pushed that thought aside. "Yeah, of course," I said, standing up. "We can go to the park. I think I'm ready for some fresh air." Leo grinned and grabbed my hand, leading me toward the door. As we walked outside, I couldn't help but notice how much I had missed these moments. The quiet afternoons, the laughter, the simple things that I had let slip away. We spent the next couple of hours at the park, throwing a frisbee around, playing on the swings, and just enjoying each other's company. For those few hours, everything felt right. I wasn't thinking about work, or about Mia, or about all the things I had been running from. I was just with Leo, and that was enough. When we got home, Leo was exhausted. He had a big smile on his face, but I could tell he was ready for bed. I tucked him in, kissed him on the forehead, and told him I loved him. As I closed the door, I sat down on the couch, my mind racing again. There were so many things I hadn't figured out, so many things I needed to confront. But for now, I had to focus on what I could control. And right now, that was Leo. The phone buzzed again, and I glanced at it. This time, it was from Mia. I hesitated before opening it. "Can we talk?" it said. I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure I was ready for this, but I knew that ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. I had to face it, just like everything else. So, I typed a quick response. "Okay. When?" She replied almost immediately. "How about now?" I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Was I really ready for this? Was I ready to open up the past again? I didn't know what would happen, but I knew I couldn't run from it anymore. I took one last look at the clock, then walked to my desk, sitting down in front of the computer. I opened the video call app and stared at the screen. After a few seconds, Mia's face appeared. "Hey," she said softly, her voice tentative. "How have you been?" I didn't know how to answer. I hadn't been good. I hadn't been anything close to good, but that wasn't what mattered right now. What mattered was that we were talking. I've been okay, I said, forcing a smile. And you? Trying to figure things out, she said, looking down. I've been thinking about you. About us. That made my heart skip. Was she saying what I thought she was saying? I've been thinking about us too, I said slowly. But I don't know what comes next. Mia looked up, her eyes searching mine. I don't know either, she said quietly. But I think we need to figure it out. Together. I took a deep breath, unsure if I was ready for the answer I'd find. But I knew one thing. This conversation was long overdue. I didn't know what I was expecting from this conversation. Honestly, part of me wasn't sure if I even wanted to go down this road again. But as soon as I saw Mia's face on the screen, I knew it was too late to back out now. She looked different, a little more tired, maybe a little older, but still unmistakably her. It was a reminder of everything we'd shared, the history that tied us together, and the mess we were still tangled in. There was a silence between us, a heavy kind of silence, like both of us were waiting for the other to make the first move. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, but I knew I had to say something. I've been thinking about you too, I said, my voice low. But I don't know what's next. I don't know if I'm ready to just jump back into everything. It's been a while, Mia. She nodded, her lips pressed together in a thin line. I could see that she understood. I get that, she said quietly. But we can't keep avoiding this forever, can we? We have to talk eventually. I swallowed hard. She was right. I'd been avoiding the truth for months, hiding from the mess I'd made of things. I had buried myself in work and distractions, and anything that would keep me from facing what had happened between us. But Mia had always been someone who faced things head on, and I couldn't hide from her forever. The silence stretched on for a few more moments, neither of us knowing what to say next. I glanced at her, trying to find something in her eyes that would give me an answer. But there was nothing, just the same uncertainty I was feeling, the same doubts about where we were headed. I don't know if I can do this again, I finally said, the words escaping before I could stop them. I don't know if I can open myself up like I did before, not after everything that's happened. Mia looked at me, her face softening. I'm not asking for everything to just go back to the way it was, she said, her voice quieter now. I just want us to be able to talk, to figure out if there's still something left here. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to say yes, to tell her that we could fix this, that we could find our way back to what we once had. But another part of me was terrified that we were both too broken to fix, that whatever was left of us had been shattered beyond repair. I don't know if we can fix this, I said, my voice rough. But I'm willing to try, Mia. I don't want to lose you. Not again. I could see the relief in her eyes, though she tried to hide it behind a smile. It was a small thing, but it was enough. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe we weren't completely lost. Maybe there was still something worth fighting for. She sighed, her eyes dropping to her hands. I've missed you, she said softly. I've missed us. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that I'd missed her too. But the words wouldn't come. There was too much between us, too much that had been left unsaid. And I couldn't just pretend like everything was fine, like we could pick up where we left off. It wasn't that simple. I don't know how we're supposed to fix this, I said finally, my voice breaking. I don't know where to start. Mia nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. I know, but we have to start somewhere, right? I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. Maybe she was right. Maybe we didn't need to have all the answers right now. Maybe we just needed to take it one step at a time. I don't want to hurt you again, I said, opening my eyes to meet her gaze. I don't want to mess things up. I don't want to be the one who hurts you either, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But we have to be honest with each other. We can't move forward if we're both holding on to things we can't change. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. She was right. We couldn't move forward if we kept pretending like everything was okay. We had to face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. We had to deal with the mistakes we had made, and the ones we were still trying to make sense of. I don't know if we can fix everything, I said, my words slow, deliberate. But I think we owe it to ourselves to try, to figure out if there's still something here worth fighting for. Mia's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a spark of hope in her expression. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe we could find our way back to each other. I don't know if we can fix everything either, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I want to try. For us. For what we used to have. I nodded, my heart heavy with everything we still had to work through. But I also felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that Mia felt the same way. We weren't alone in this anymore. We were both willing to try, to face the mess we had made, and to rebuild from the ashes. We talked for hours that night, digging through the wreckage of our past and trying to make sense of everything. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was a start that felt like we were finally moving forward, even if we didn't know exactly where we were headed. As the conversation came to an end, I felt exhausted, emotionally drained, but I also felt like something inside me had shifted. Maybe we weren't done yet. Maybe there was still hope. I'm glad we talked, Mia said, her voice soft. I really am. Me too, I replied, my voice low. I think we can figure this out. Together. As I ended the call, I sat in the silence of my room, feeling a weight lifted off my chest. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a while, I felt like we might just make it. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't get the conversation out of my mind. Every time I tried to focus on work or distract myself with anything else, her words would echo in my head. We have to be honest with each other. It was as though they were following me, haunting me in every moment of silence. I knew I couldn't ignore this anymore. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine, that we could just go on as we had before. But that was easier said than done. I hadn't figured out what honesty truly meant between us. After everything we'd been through, how could we possibly go back to being open and vulnerable with each other? It felt like we were stepping into a minefield where one wrong step could blow everything up again. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe that was exactly what we needed. To step into the unknown, to risk it all, even if it meant facing the pain head on. I spent the next couple of days trying to figure out where I stood, what I really wanted. I kept thinking back to the time before everything fell apart, the laughter, the connection, the way it felt like we could conquer anything together. But then I'd remember the betrayal, the lies, the hurt. It wasn't so easy to ignore that, and I knew Mia felt the same way. She wasn't just going to forgive everything and pretend like nothing happened. If we were going to move forward, we had to confront it all. I needed to talk to her again, not through messages or short phone calls, but face to face. I wasn't sure how I was going to bring it up, but I knew I had to. This wasn't something we could fix by avoiding the tough conversations. I texted her that morning, asking if she had time to meet up. Her reply came almost instantly. Yeah, I'd like that. I'll be free this afternoon. I knew this was it. I couldn't keep putting it off. We were going to face everything, for better or for worse. When I arrived at the cafe we'd agreed on, I saw her sitting by the window, nervously tapping her fingers on the table. She looked up as soon as I walked in, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. There was an awkwardness in the air, a tension that felt almost suffocating. But then she smiled, and for a split second, I saw the person I remembered, the girl who could always make me laugh, even on the worst days. Hey, she said softly, standing up to give me a quick hug. I'm glad you agreed to meet. Yeah, I replied, sitting down across from her. Me too. We both sat in silence for a moment, unsure of where to begin. I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing on both of us, and I knew that whatever was said next could change everything. Finally, I broke the silence. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day. I started. About being honest with each other. And, I don't know, I guess I'm scared. I'm scared of what it means to actually face everything, you know. She nodded slowly, her eyes searching mine. I get that. I'm scared too. But we can't keep running from it. If we want any chance of moving forward, we have to face the truth. All of it. Even the stuff we're scared of. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. She was right, of course. We couldn't keep dancing around the truth forever. We had to confront it, no matter how messy or painful it might be. But how could we possibly move past all the hurt? How could we rebuild something when the foundation had already been shattered? I'm not asking for everything to be fixed overnight, Mia continued, her voice steady but soft. But we have to start somewhere. And I don't want to do this alone. I don't want to go through this without you. I could feel my chest tightening, my emotions threatening to spill over. She was opening up to me, giving me a chance, and I knew I had to do the same. I had to be brave, even if it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I don't know if I can fix everything, I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. But I don't want to lose you again. I don't want to lose us. For a moment, we just sat there, staring at each other. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a decision. And in that silence, I realized something. We couldn't go back to how things were. That wasn't possible. But maybe, just maybe, we could build something new. Something stronger. Something real. I'm not asking for perfection, I said, my voice trembling. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to make it right. To try again. Mia looked at me, her expression softening. She reached across the table, her hand resting gently over mine. We'll try together, she whispered. But it won't be easy. It's going to take time. We have to be patient with each other. With ourselves. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I could feel the tears welling up, but I fought them back. This wasn't the time for weakness. This was the moment to be strong, to show Mia that I was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. I'm ready, I said finally, my voice steady. I'm ready to face the truth, whatever it takes. Mia smiled then, a small, tentative smile. It wasn't the kind of smile I remembered, the carefree, easy kind. But it was a start, and that was enough for me. We spent the next couple of hours talking, slowly peeling back the layers of everything that had happened. We didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. We weren't avoiding the hard truths anymore. We were confronting them, together, and maybe that was enough for now. When we finally parted ways that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. We didn't have a perfect solution. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other. And for the first time in months, that was enough. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it. With Mia, or without her. We would both have to fight for our happiness, for whatever we had left. But at least we were fighting together, and that was all I could ask for. The next few days were a mix of awkward silences and tentative steps forward. It was like we were both walking on eggshells, not quite sure of how to move or what to say. We had started the process of rebuilding, but neither of us really knew how to start. The conversation we had at the cafe felt like the first step, but it was just that, the first step. The distance between us was still there, lurking in the background. It was like trying to put together a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. I kept replaying that moment in my head, the moment when Mia had reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I could still feel the warmth of her touch, the sincerity in her eyes. But there were still so many things unsaid. It was clear we both wanted to move forward, but how? How do you rebuild trust when it's been shattered so completely? I had moments where I thought maybe it was all too much, that the damage was too deep. And then I'd remember how I felt when we first met, how easy it had been to talk to her, how everything seemed so effortless. It didn't feel like that anymore. The lightness we once had was gone. But maybe it didn't have to be completely gone. Maybe, with time, we could find it again. I wasn't sure how long it would take, but I had to try. The next weekend, Mia texted me. "You want to go for a walk?" she asked, just like that. A simple question, but to me, it felt like everything. I agreed without hesitation. The last few days of avoiding the heavier subjects had started to wear on me. I needed more than just surface-level conversations. I needed to dig deeper, confront the truth we were both avoiding. We both needed to be vulnerable with each other. I was ready, or at least, I was trying to be. We met in the park near my apartment, a place that had once been a favorite spot for both of us. The trees were starting to bloom, and the air had a crispness to it that felt almost like a fresh start. It was hard to ignore the symbolism of it all. Could we really start over? Could we bloom again like the trees? She was waiting for me by the old bench we used to sit at, looking at her phone as I approached. When she saw me, she immediately stood up and gave me a small, unsure smile. I could tell she was nervous too. She always had been better at masking her feelings than I was. But today, there was something different in the air between us. It wasn't the tension of old resentments. It was the kind of nervous energy that only comes with trying something new, something important. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "Hey," Mia replied, and there was a slight tremor in her voice that made my stomach flip. I wanted to reach out and hold her, to comfort her, but I knew better. I had to let her be. She had to come to me when she was ready. We started walking slowly, side by side, not saying much at first. The silence was comfortable in a way, as if we were both gathering our thoughts, trying to find the right words. It felt like we were walking through a delicate moment, not wanting to break the fragile calm between us. "So," Mia said finally, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about everything we talked about last time. And I don't want to rush things, but I also don't want to keep putting things off. We have to face everything eventually, right?" Her words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. She was right, of course. We couldn't keep dancing around the issue forever. But was I ready? Could I really face everything? All the anger, all the hurt? "I think you're right," I said after a long pause. "We can't keep pretending that things are fine. They're not. We both know that. But I want to fix this. I want to make it right." Mia nodded slowly, glancing at me from the corner of her eye. "I want that too. But I don't know if I can just forget everything that's happened. I know we can't go back to how things were before, but can we ever move forward from here?" I stopped walking and turned to face her. The question was a simple one, but the weight behind it felt like 1,000 pounds. Could we really move forward? Did we have the strength to rebuild? "Mia, I don't think we can go back to what we were," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "But maybe we don't need to. Maybe we can create something new. Maybe we can take the pain and use it to make us stronger, to make us better for each other." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I want that. But I'm scared, you know. I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to put myself out there and then have it all fall apart." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on my own pain, my own fears, that I hadn't really considered hers. She was just as scared as I was, just as uncertain. "I get that," I said softly, stepping closer to her. "I'm scared too, but I can't promise that we won't get hurt. I can't promise that everything will be perfect, but I can promise that I'll try. I'll try to be better, to be what you need me to be. I won't give up on us." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes searching mine. I could see the doubt there, but also something else. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the smallest flicker of trust, still there beneath everything else. "I want to believe you," she said quietly, "but I need time. I need to see that this is real." "I understand," I said, reaching out and gently touching her arm. "We'll take it slow. No pressure. Just one step at a time." Mia nodded, a small, grateful smile crossing her face. "Okay, one step at a time." We continued walking in silence, the weight of the conversation still hanging in the air. But for the first time in a while, I felt like we were heading in the right direction. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but we were moving forward, together. The next week felt like a balancing act. Every time I saw Mia, I could feel the tension between us, this strange mix of hope and caution. I didn't know if I should take it slow or just dive right in. There was a part of me that wanted to push for progress, to fix things as fast as possible, but I knew that wasn't the answer. This wasn't something that could be rushed. Trust didn't rebuild in a day, or a week, or even a month. It was something we would have to earn back, step by step. Mia seemed to be taking it slow too. She would text me sometimes, just little things, an inside joke, or something she'd read online that reminded her of me. Small steps, but I cherished them. Every time her name lit up my phone, I felt a little spark of hope. It was like a flicker of light in a dark room. Something small but enough to make me believe there was a way out of all this mess. But then, there were other moments when I'd catch her pulling away, distancing herself in little ways. Maybe she was protecting herself. Maybe she didn't know how to handle the mess I had made of everything. I didn't know either. I just knew that I wanted to fix it, somehow. But fixing things wasn't as simple as saying the right words. It was about showing up, being there. And I had to prove to her that I could be trusted again. That Friday evening, we met up again, this time for dinner. It was my idea, a chance to do something normal, something we used to do before everything fell apart. I picked a restaurant, a quiet place we both liked, nothing too fancy, just familiar enough to feel comfortable. I wanted to make it feel like a fresh start, even if it was only for one night. When I arrived, Mia was already sitting at a table near the window. The light from the street lamps outside made her hair look like it was glowing, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching her. She looked so normal. She was sipping a glass of water, scrolling through her phone, and I could almost imagine that nothing had ever changed between us. But I knew better. Things were different now. Things were fragile. "Hey," I said, finally walking over to the table. She looked up, and her face broke into a small smile. "Hey," she replied, her voice soft, but there was something hesitant about it. Maybe it was the same thing I was feeling, this unease that hung in the air between us. I sat down across from her, and we fell into a brief, awkward silence. The waiter came over and took our drink orders, and when he left, Mia spoke again. "So, how was your week?" she asked, a little too casually. "It was all right," I said, trying to keep things light. "Busy, but nothing too crazy. How about you?" "Same," she replied, glancing down at her menu. "Just working, life." I nodded. It felt strange, this small talk between us. We used to talk about everything, but now it was like we were both afraid to say the wrong thing. I could feel the words hanging in the air, unspoken, the things we both wanted to say, but didn't know how to. "So," I began, trying to break the tension, "how about we actually talk about something real tonight?" Mia raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You mean, like, feelings and stuff?" I laughed, relieved that she was at least trying to joke around. "Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it." She set her menu down and leaned back in her chair. "All right, let's talk then. I think we need to, don't you?" "I agree," I said, my voice serious now. "I don't want us to just go through the motions. I want to fix this, Mia. I want to make things right. But I know I can't just expect you to forgive me overnight. I know I've hurt you, and I need to own that." Mia's expression softened, and for a second, I saw a flicker of the person I had fallen in love with. She was still here, underneath the walls she had built to protect herself. She wasn't giving up on us. Not yet. "I appreciate you saying that," she said quietly. "I know it's not easy to admit when you've done something wrong, but I need to know that you're not just sorry because you got caught. I need to know that you're sorry because you genuinely regret what happened, because you want to be better." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course, she needed to hear that. She needed to know that I wasn't just sorry for the consequences of my actions, but for the pain I caused her. I had been so focused on myself, on how I was feeling, that I hadn't really thought about how much my mistakes had affected her. "I am sorry," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "Not just because of what happened, but because I let you down. I know I can't change the past, but I can promise that I'll do everything I can to make up for it. I don't expect you to just forgive me, but I hope you can see that I'm trying." Mia looked at me for a long moment, her gaze searching, like she was looking for something. Maybe the sincerity in my eyes, maybe the truth behind my words. I wasn't sure what she was looking for, but I knew I had to show her that I was being honest. "I wasn't perfect, but I was trying. I want to believe you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not going to be easy. You can't just say the right words and expect everything to be okay." "I know," I said, my voice full of conviction. "I'm not asking for it to be easy. I just need you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Mia nodded, her eyes glistening with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was just exhaustion. I didn't know, but I could see that she was still holding on, still willing to try. The rest of the dinner was quieter, but not uncomfortable. We talked about small things. How her dog had started chewing on the furniture. How her sister had recently gotten engaged. How the weather was finally warming up. We didn't talk about the heavy stuff, but that was okay. We were both still figuring out how to navigate this new version of our relationship. When the check came, I reached for it, but Mia stopped me with a hand on mine. "I've got this," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. I raised an eyebrow, but she insisted. "It's only fair." I didn't argue. We were still figuring things out, but it felt like a small step forward, and maybe that was enough for tonight. The days after dinner felt like a strange kind of limbo. There was no immediate closure, no resolution to the mess I had made, but there was something different in the way Mia acted. There was a shift, even if it was subtle. She wasn't pulling away as much anymore. The walls weren't as high. Every text from her felt like a small victory, a crack in the distance between us. I didn't know where we were heading, but I could sense that we were moving in the right direction. The next week, she texted me again, something simple, like a memory from one of our old trips together. The old jokes were still there. It was as if the cracks in our past were starting to heal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still walking on eggshells, that one wrong step could shatter everything. I was in a coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon when Mia called. I had been sitting there for a while, lost in my thoughts, trying to work through all the things I hadn't been able to say to her. I hadn't expected her to call, and when I saw her name flash on my screen, my heart skipped a beat. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if it was a sign that things were about to get complicated again, but I answered anyway. "Hey," I said, trying to sound calm even though my heart was racing. "Hey," she replied. Her voice sounded different, lighter, almost like she was testing the waters again. "I was wondering if you wanted to grab lunch today. I know it's been a while since we did something normal." I felt a small surge of hope. A part of me had been wondering when she would finally be ready to take that step. We hadn't spent time together outside of our awkward dinner, but maybe this was the start of something new. "I'd love that," I said, my voice a little more eager than I intended. "Where do you want to go?" "I was thinking about that little place by the lake," she said, the familiar warmth in her voice returning. "You know, the one with the outdoor seating?" I smiled, remembering how we used to sit there for hours, just talking about life. It had always been one of our favorite spots. "I remember. Sounds perfect. I'll meet you there in about an hour." "See you then," she said, and the line went quiet. I put my phone down and took a deep breath. I didn't know what this lunch would mean, but I felt like it was another small step forward. I couldn't predict how things were going to go, but I had to stay patient, even if every part of me wanted to rush ahead. When I arrived, Mia was already sitting at a table outside, the sun casting a soft glow on her face. She was wearing a light sweater, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. As usual, she looked effortlessly beautiful, and for a moment, I forgot all the mess between us. She was just Mia, the girl I had fallen in love with. "Hey," I said, walking up to her. "Hey," she replied, giving me a soft smile. It wasn't the wide grin I was used to, but it was enough. A step forward, I reminded myself. I sat down across from her, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The air between us was comfortable, but there was still that underlying tension. We both knew it wasn't going to be easy. "So, what's been going on?" I asked, trying to break the silence. I wanted to make things light, but I also didn't want to ignore the elephant in the room. "Not much, honestly," she said, shrugging. "Just work. The usual. And I've been trying to focus on myself a little, you know." I nodded, not sure how to respond. I wasn't entirely sure what she meant by that. Was she trying to figure things out? Was she just keeping herself busy, so she wouldn't have to think about us? I couldn't be sure, but I didn't want to push her. "You've been good, though?" she asked after a beat, her eyes meeting mine. I hesitated. It wasn't an easy question to answer. "I'm trying," I said. "I'm trying to figure things out, too. I know I've got a lot to make up for, and I'm not going to pretend it's all going to be okay right away. But I want to show you that I'm serious. I want to be better for you." Mia didn't say anything at first, just sat there, her gaze steady on me. It was like she was searching for something, maybe for proof that I meant what I said. I could feel her eyes on me, and it made my chest tighten. I know, she finally said, her voice quiet. And I think I'm starting to see that. But I need to know that it's not just about fixing what happened. It's about moving forward too, you know. I swallowed, unsure of where this conversation was going. What do you mean? I mean, she said slowly, I'm not sure I can just go back to the way things were. I don't want to just pick up where we left off. I want to build something new. But I can't do that if we're stuck in the past. We both need to figure out what we want from this. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right, of course. I had been so focused on fixing the past, on trying to undo everything I'd messed up, that I hadn't really thought about how we could move forward. Moving forward wasn't just about making things right. It was about creating something new, something better. I get it, I said quietly. And I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I just want us to figure out if we can still build something, even if it's not the same as it was before. She smiled faintly, her eyes softening. I want that too, but it's going to take time. I'm okay with that, I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I'll wait as long as it takes. We sat there for a while, just talking about nothing in particular, small, casual things that didn't feel heavy. But even in the small talk, I could feel the shift between us. There was still a long way to go, but today felt like a step in the right direction. Maybe we couldn't fix everything all at once, but we could take it one day at a time. The next few days felt like a strange balance between hope and uncertainty. Mia and I continued texting, small updates about our day-to-day lives, little moments shared through the screen. It wasn't the same as before, not yet, but there was a quiet understanding growing between us, a shared desire to rebuild what had once been so easy. It was fragile, delicate, but it was something. I tried not to overthink it. I knew Mia needed her space, and I didn't want to rush anything. But every time I saw a message from her, my heart would race. It wasn't just the texts. It was how she was starting to open up again, the small things, like the time she sent me a photo of her morning coffee, with the caption, "This used to be our thing." She didn't have to say it, but I knew what she meant. We used to do little things like that, little inside jokes that somehow made us feel closer. A part of me wished that we could just go back to how it was, skip all the hard stuff, and pretend that nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. That wasn't how life worked. That wasn't how relationships worked. We were building something new, even if it didn't look the same. It was a Thursday evening when Mia called me again. I'd been busy with work, but when I saw her name flash across my screen, my heart skipped. I was starting to get used to the feeling of nervous excitement every time she reached out. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound casual, but I couldn't keep the smile off my face. "Hey," she replied, and there was something in her voice, like she had been thinking about this for a while. "I was wondering if you wanted to hang out this weekend. Nothing big, just, something low-key." "Of course," I said without hesitation. "What did you have in mind?" "I was thinking of checking out that new art exhibit downtown," she said. "It's supposed to be really good. I know it's been a while since we did something like that, so..." "Sounds perfect," I said, my heart swelling. The idea of spending time with her again, doing something we used to enjoy, felt like the right kind of normal. Maybe it wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt significant to me. "I'll text you the details," she said. "It'll be good to do something like this again." I agreed, and we hung up. It wasn't a major breakthrough, but it felt like progress. It felt like the first step in whatever this new version of us was going to be. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to optimism. Maybe we were really going to be okay. The weekend arrived quickly, and I found myself pacing in my apartment, trying to figure out what to wear. It wasn't like we were dressing up for a fancy dinner or anything, but it felt like this day mattered. It wasn't just an outing. It was another chance to see if we could build a bridge between the past and the future. When I arrived at the art gallery, I spotted Mia right away. She was standing outside, looking at her phone. She was wearing a simple denim jacket, her hair tied loosely in a bun. She looked good, relaxed, and even though there was still some distance between us, there was a sense of ease in her presence that I hadn't felt in a while. "Hey," I said, walking up to her. "I'm guessing you found the place all right." She looked up, her eyes meeting mine with a small smile. Yeah, I just got here a few minutes ago. I thought I'd check out the first few pieces before you got here. Lead the way, I said, grinning. Try to keep the mood light. We walked inside together, the atmosphere inside the gallery quiet and almost reverent. The lighting was soft, and the walls were lined with bold, abstract art. I wasn't the biggest fan of modern art, but it didn't matter. What mattered was being here with Mia, sharing this space together. We wandered through the exhibits in silence at first, both of us lost in the artwork. I could feel her presence beside me, the occasional glance at each other, the shared understanding that we were here, together, and that this wasn't just a casual outing. It was a moment of connection, however small. Eventually, Mia stopped in front of a large painting. It was a chaotic burst of colors, splattered across the canvas in an almost violent display. "What do you think?" she asked, her eyes studying the painting intently. I took a step closer, considering the piece. "It's messy," I said, chuckling, "but I kind of like it. It's like someone just threw all their emotions on a canvas." Mia smiled at that, her eyes softening. "Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. A mess of emotions. But sometimes that's kind of beautiful, right?" I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Yeah, I guess it is." We lingered for a while, talking about the art, about life, about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were just two people spending time together, enjoying each other's company. There was no tension, no awkwardness, just a quiet sense of understanding. At one point, Mia turned to me, her expression serious. "I'm glad we're doing this," she said, her voice a little softer than before. I needed this. I met her gaze, my heart suddenly pounding. "Me too," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I've missed this. I've missed you." She smiled, but it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't the carefree, all-knowing smile that used to light up her face. This one was more subdued, thoughtful, like she was considering something. "I know," she said, almost whispering. "I've missed you too, but I need to be honest with you." The words hung in the air between us, and my chest tightened. What was she going to say? What did she need to be honest about? I tried to keep my composure, even though I was already bracing myself for whatever was coming next. "I'm still figuring things out," she said finally, her voice steady but unsure. "I don't have all the answers, and I'm not ready to rush anything." "I don't want to rush," I said quickly, my heart beating faster. "I'm not asking you to. I just want to be here, with you, however we need to take it." She looked at me for a long moment, and then she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll figure it out. Together." The rest of the gallery visit passed in a sort of quiet haze. Both of us lost in thought, but still close, still connected in a way that felt fragile but real. I could tell Mia was still processing everything, still trying to find her footing in the aftermath of what had happened. It wasn't easy for her, and I couldn't pretend that it was for me either. But there was something in the air between us, something unspoken but understood. We were trying. When we finally left the gallery, the cool evening air hit me like a splash of water. It felt refreshing, like we were stepping into something new, something we could build. The night was still young, and part of me wanted to keep talking, to keep this moment going. But I could sense Mia was starting to tire. She hadn't said anything, but there was a certain quietness to her, something that made me pause. "Do you want to grab a drink?" I asked, trying to keep the tone casual, but I could hear the hesitation in my own voice. I didn't want to push her, didn't want to overstep if she wasn't ready. Mia looked at me for a moment, and I could see her weighing the idea. She gave a small nod. "Yeah, I think that sounds nice." We walked to a nearby bar, the kind of place that had dim lighting, wooden tables, and soft music playing in the background. It wasn't loud, and it wasn't fancy, just a quiet, unassuming spot. It was perfect. We found a booth by the window, and once we sat down, there was a long silence between us. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward, but rather comforting, like we both needed this space to gather our thoughts. Mia finally spoke, breaking the stillness. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about everything," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I know I've been distant, and I hate that. I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't know how to just fix things. I took a deep breath. I get it. I do. It's not something that can just be fixed with a few words or a few gestures. It's going to take time, and I'm okay with that. I'm not asking for you to forget or to just jump back to where we were. I just want to move forward, step by step, and I'll be here, no matter how long it takes. Mia's eyes met mine, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker, something, relief maybe, or hope. It was hard to tell, but I felt it. Thank you, she said, her voice sincere. That means a lot to me. I just don't want to hurt you again. I don't want to mess this up, you know. You won't, I said, my words firm. We're figuring this out together. We're not rushing. There's no finish line, no deadline, just us. She smiled then, a small, tentative smile, but it was real. I like that. I think I needed to hear that. We sat there for a while, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed in a way that felt so familiar, like we were picking up pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for too long. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As the night went on, the weight of the past few weeks seemed to lift, if only for a moment. I could see Mia relaxing, her shoulders loosening, the tension in her face starting to fade. We didn't talk about the past directly. We didn't need to. It was there, lingering in the background, but we were choosing to focus on the present, on what was right in front of us. I noticed the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, how her voice sounded when she was excited about something, things I had forgotten over time. And when she looked at me, there was a softness, a quiet understanding that hadn't been there before. It was like we were both learning how to be in the same space again, but in a new way. It wasn't the same as before, it couldn't be, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe this was how we were supposed to be now. When it was time to leave, we walked out of the bar together, our shoulders brushing lightly as we made our way to the street. The air was colder now, but there was a certain warmth between us that I hadn't felt in what felt like forever. So, I said, breaking the silence, "What's next for us?" Mia paused, her hands stuffed deep into her jacket pockets as she looked up at the stars. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but I think we take it one day at a time." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. One day at a time. It wasn't a promise that everything would work out, but it was a commitment to try. And that was enough for me. We reached her car, and Mia turned to face me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stood there, the sound of the city fading into the background, the weight of everything that had happened still hanging between us, but somehow less heavy. "I'll text you when I get home," Mia said finally, her voice soft. I smiled. "Okay, drive safe." She nodded, then leaned in, just slightly, for a quick hug. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A gesture of comfort, of understanding, of something we both needed. As she pulled away, she looked at me one last time, her eyes meeting mine with something that felt like reassurance. "I'll see you soon," she said, her voice steady. "Yeah," I replied. "I'll see you soon." As she drove off, I stood there for a moment, watching the taillights fade into the distance. It wasn't the end of our story. It wasn't even the beginning of the end, but it was a step forward. And right now, that was all I needed. I spent the next few days replaying every moment of the night in my head, trying to read between the lines of what Mia had said, trying to decipher if there was something she wasn't telling me. It wasn't that I didn't trust her. It was more like I had learned not to trust myself. I had pushed so hard for answers in the past, and now, it felt like I was treading water, trying not to drown in my own doubts. Work was a distraction, but not a very good one. I was still holding on to the hope that the conversation with Mia wasn't the end of it, that it wasn't just an acknowledgement of what went wrong, but a way to build something better. And yet, every time I thought about what had happened, I couldn't help but wonder if we were just delaying the inevitable. Were we just two people clinging to what we once had, too afraid to face the fact that it was over? It was on a Tuesday when I got the text. Mia had reached out, a simple message that made my heart race a little. "Can we talk?" My gut reaction was to let it sit for a while, to not rush into anything. But I couldn't. I was already drafting a reply in my head, my fingers itching to type. I was afraid of what this conversation might bring, But more than that, I was terrified of what would happen if we didn't have it. I texted back a simple, "Of course." When? She responded almost immediately, "How about tonight?" I agreed. I didn't even have to think about it. The whole day felt like a slow build-up to this moment. I couldn't focus on anything. Work, my emails, even lunch. All of it felt irrelevant. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her message to confirm the time and place. When the clock finally ticked past 7, I found myself pacing in my apartment, nervously trying to decide what to wear. There was no real reason to care about the details, but I felt like I had to make everything perfect. Mia and I had been through so much, and here we were again, on the brink of another conversation that could change everything. I chose something simple, jeans and a black hoodie. Something comfortable, but still presentable. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I also didn't want to look careless. After all, I wasn't sure what the outcome of tonight would be. I wasn't even sure what I wanted it to be. When I arrived at the cafe, I saw Mia sitting at a table by the window, looking out at the street. Her posture was slouched, arms crossed tightly over her chest. I could tell she was nervous. I wasn't the only one who had been thinking about this. As I walked over, she looked up and gave me a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was polite, distant, almost like she was trying to make sure she was holding it together. "Hey," I said softly, taking a seat across from her. "Hey," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. There was a moment of silence, when neither of us knew exactly where to start. It wasn't uncomfortable, just uncertain. "Do you want to go first?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. I wasn't sure why I said that, but it felt like the right thing to do. Like I was giving her space to speak first, even though I knew I had just as much to say. Mia hesitated before she spoke, her eyes flicking down to her hands. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we talked about the other night, and I don't know." She trailed off, shaking her head slightly. "It's like I've been holding so much back, and I don't know how to get it all out. How to make it right." "I know what you mean," I said. "I've been feeling the same way. But I think the hardest part is just being honest. I think that's where we've been messing up." Her gaze lifted to meet mine then, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. The kind of vulnerability that was rare for her. "I'm scared, you know," she whispered. "I'm scared that this is all just a mistake. That maybe I don't deserve what we had, or that I'm not the person I used to be. And I don't know how to fix it." Her words hung in the air between us, thick with the weight of all the unspoken things we'd avoided. I wanted to say something comforting, something that would make her feel better, but all I could do was look at her and let her words sink in. The fear in her voice was so familiar to me, and I realized then that it wasn't just her who was scared. It was both of us. "I don't think it's a mistake," I said finally. "I don't. And I think we both have to stop worrying about what we think we deserve. Maybe what matters more is what we want. And if we want to make it work, we will. One step at a time." She nodded slowly, though it was clear she wasn't entirely convinced. I couldn't blame her. I wasn't entirely convinced myself. "But what if it's too late?" she asked, her voice cracking just a little. "What if we've already lost too much?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I had asked myself that 1,000 times in the past week, trying to decide if the distance between us was too great to bridge. But there was something in Mia's eyes, something that told me she wasn't ready to give up just yet. And maybe, just maybe, neither was I. "I don't think it's too late," I said firmly, though I couldn't quite shake the doubt that lingered in the back of my mind. "But we have to be honest with each other. We can't hide from what's happened, and we can't pretend like it's all going to be perfect from here on out." Mia looked at me for a long time, her expression unreadable, before she spoke again. "I'm willing to try, if you are." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I am. I want to try. I want to see where this goes." We sat there for a while longer, neither of us speaking, just letting the silence fill the space between us. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a quiet understanding that we both had a long road ahead of us, but maybe, just maybe, it was a road worth walking together. As we stood up to leave, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. We weren't fixed. We weren't even close. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we might actually make it. And that, at least, was enough to hold on to for now. The next few days passed in a blur. I wasn't sure what to expect from Mia after our conversation, but there was something about her willingness to try that stuck with me. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect, but it was a promise that we weren't ready to let go. And somehow, that made all the difference. But the uncertainty still lingered. We had taken a small step forward, but it felt like we were standing on the edge of something, waiting for the ground to either crumble beneath us or hold steady. It was frustrating, not knowing whether this was going to be the start of something new or just the beginning of an inevitable end. But I was trying to stay optimistic, trying not to overthink it. After all, this wasn't the first time we'd been through rough patches, and each time, we'd made it through. Maybe this time wouldn't be any different. I was sitting on my couch one evening, flipping through a book I hadn't been able to focus on for days, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, seeing Mia's name flashing across it. My heart skipped a beat, my fingers hovering over the screen for a moment before I unlocked my phone and opened the message. "Can I come over?" I read it over a few times, wondering if this was a good sign or a bad one. Part of me was terrified that this would be the conversation where everything fell apart, but another part of me wanted to see her, to try and make things right. I didn't even hesitate before typing back. "Sure. When?" She replied almost immediately. "In a bit. I'll be there in 20. My mind raced as I set the phone down. I had no idea what she wanted to talk about, but I knew I needed to be ready for whatever it was. I stood up and started pacing around my apartment, trying to shake off the nerves. It felt like one of those moments where you know something big is coming, but you're not sure if it's going to be good or bad. And every time I thought about it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was going to change everything. I tried to distract myself by picking up the few things that were scattered around, some dishes, my jacket draped over the back of the couch, but it didn't help. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the background, each second dragging longer than the one before. When the doorbell finally rang, I practically jumped out of my skin. I opened the door to find Mia standing there, her expression unreadable. She was wearing a light jacket, her hair pulled back loosely, and she looked like she'd been thinking about this as much as I had. It was almost as if we were both waiting for the other to speak first, afraid that whatever was said might be the last thing we ever said. "Hey," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "Come on in." She walked past me without saying anything, heading straight for the living room. I followed her, watching as she sat down on the couch, pulling her knees up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around them. It was a posture I knew all too well, the way she always sat when she was feeling vulnerable, when she was unsure of what to say or how to say it. "Do you want something to drink?" I asked, my voice coming out more nervous than I intended. She shook her head, her eyes still focused on the floor. "No, I'm fine," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a seat next to her, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the weight of the space between us. The silence was almost unbearable, but neither of us seemed to know how to break it. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice cracking slightly as she spoke, "about everything, about what you said the other night, and I know I haven't been completely honest with you." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I don't know why I did it, why I let everything go so far without saying anything. But I need you to understand that it wasn't because I didn't care about you. It wasn't because I wanted to hurt you." I turned to her, my heart tightening in my chest. "What are you talking about, Mia?" She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and sadness. "I should have told you sooner," she said, "but I didn't know how. And now it feels too late." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't what I had been expecting, and a part of me already knew that whatever she was about to say would hurt. I swallowed hard, trying to prepare myself for whatever came next. "I'm not proud of it," she said, her voice shaky now, "but I've been seeing someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to say, how to react. All I could do was stare at her, trying to make sense of what she had just confessed. "I didn't want to hurt you, I swear," she continued, "but I got so caught up in it all. and I didn't know how to stop. It was a mistake, a huge mistake, and I hate myself for it. The room felt like it was closing in on me. The betrayal I had been fearing for so long was finally out in the open, and there was no denying it now. I felt a wave of anger and confusion flood over me. But more than anything, I just felt lost. I had trusted her, loved her, and this was what I got in return. I don't even know what to say. I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Why didn't you just tell me? Why let it go this far? I thought I could fix it, she said, her voice breaking. But I couldn't. And now I've ruined everything. I sat there, speechless, the weight of her words sinking in. I couldn't tell if I was numb or if I was just too shocked to feel anything. All I knew was that whatever future we had, whatever hope I had been holding on to, had just been shattered. Do you still love them? I finally asked, my voice barely audible. She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. I do. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. It doesn't mean I want to lose you. I wanted to scream, to yell, to let the anger and hurt spill out, but I couldn't. Instead, I just sat there, trying to make sense of it all, wondering where it all went wrong. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, neither of us knowing what to do next. I stared at the phone screen, heart racing, mind spinning. What the hell had just happened? I could feel the cold sweat on the back of my neck as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Every part of my body was screaming to run away, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I tried to scroll back through the messages. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The messages on the screen blurred before my eyes. They were from Olivia, the girl I had once called a friend. The one I thought I knew better than anyone. The one I trusted with everything, my secrets, my heart, my most vulnerable moments. And now, here she was, on the other end of the screen, revealing things that shattered everything I thought I knew about her, about me, about us. The text was clear, too damning. I'm sorry I had to hide this from you, but I've been seeing Daniel for the past few months. It started as a friendship, but I couldn't stop myself. He means so much to me now, more than just a friend. I didn't want to hurt you, but I think it's time you knew. I hope you understand. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in, my throat tight. I blinked hard, trying to focus, but the words wouldn't leave my mind. Daniel, my boyfriend, the guy I had been with for 2 years, the one who had promised me forever. And Olivia, my best friend, the one person I thought would never betray me. They had been seeing each other behind my back. How could they? How could she do this to me? I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it wouldn't budge. The tears came, despite my best efforts to hold them in. I wiped at my face, feeling the sting in my eyes. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. There had to be some mistake. Maybe Olivia had sent the wrong message. Maybe it was a prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I ran my hands through my hair, pacing back and forth. My mind was racing. What should I do? What could I do? My first instinct was to call Daniel, to scream at him, demand answers. But then I remembered the last time I tried calling him. The way his voice had sounded on the phone, distant, almost cold, like he had already made his decision. And the way Olivia had looked at me earlier that week, like there was something she was hiding, something she couldn't tell me. My stomach twisted in knots. This wasn't just about Daniel. It was about Olivia too, the person I had trusted the most, the one who had been there for me through everything, or so I thought. How could she betray me like this? How could she let this happen? Was I not enough? Did I deserve this? I couldn't stand the thought of it, the thought of losing both of them, the thought of facing the reality that the people I had cared about the most were the ones who had hurt me the most. It felt like a slap in the face, and I couldn't stop it from stinging. I grabbed my phone again, my hands shaking as I searched for Olivia's number. I didn't know what I was going to say to her, but I knew I had to confront her. I needed answers. I needed to know why. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit call. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Hello. Olivia's voice sounded casual, like nothing was wrong. Like we were still friends. Still the people who had shared so many laughs, so many tears. Olivia, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What the hell is going on? There was a pause on the other end, and then a sigh. I knew this was coming, she said softly, almost sadly. I'm sorry, I really am. But I couldn't keep lying to you anymore. You deserve to know the truth. The truth, I repeated, my voice shaking. The truth is that you've been lying to me for months. You've been seeing Daniel behind my back. How could you do that? How could you hurt me like that? I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I swear it wasn't like that. I never planned for this to happen. It just did. I tried to fight it, but I couldn't, and I didn't know how to tell you. Well, you should have figured it out. I snapped, my anger rising. You should have told me the moment it started, but you didn't. You kept it a secret. You lied to me. And for what? For him. Yes, she admitted quietly. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't help the way I felt. I know it's wrong, but I love him. I love Daniel. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My head was spinning. I couldn't process it. You love him? How could you love him? He's my boyfriend, Olivia. He's mine. You know that. You've always known that. I didn't mean for it to happen, she repeated. I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't change how I feel. I know I've messed up, but I can't pretend anymore. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I don't know what to say to you. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I want to fix this. I understand, she said, her voice soft. I knew this might be the end of our friendship, but I wanted you to know the truth. I never wanted to lie to you. I didn't know what to say. The hurt was overwhelming, suffocating. I had always trusted her. I had always been there for her. And now, here she was, admitting she had been lying to me all along. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, I finally whispered. I don't know if I can look at you the same way. I understand, Olivia said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I hung up before she could say anything else. The tears came again, but this time, they weren't just from hurt. They were from anger, from betrayal, from the realization that everything I had believed in, everything I had trusted, was a lie. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. All I knew was that I had been betrayed, and I couldn't just move on from that. Not yet. Not ever.
Thank you very much for watching. Did you like this story? Like, subscribe, and write a comment about your opinion.